What is up, everybody? Welcome to the live stream. Welcome. Happy Monday evening. We're going to sit around. We're going to talk about FPV, aren't we? Yes, we are. Hang on 1 second. I see a problem. Oh, this is going to be too annoying. There we go. We're not charging any batteries. We don't need that fan running in the background. That's better. Okay. That's better. No, you can't hear that. Okay. Great. Leave that alone. Woo! I was just looking around at my office and thinking about what a gosh dang mess my office is. And the reason my office is a mess, well, it's because of who I am as a person. But also, the way the cleaning works is while I'm working on a project, the office slowly gets messier and messier. And then when the project is over, the office gets picked up to some degree. And the project I have been working on, some people caught it as I brought it in, has been this little fella, this little humdinger right here, which, as you can see, is finished. Well, I mean, you take my word for it. It is finished. It is a He-Wing Ranger T1 with the VTOL mod. You can do vertical takeoff and landing. Vertical landing is really the important part. Although these days the vertical takeoff, I'm still figuring out. I don't feel very confident flying it as a plane around my house because my property is so compact. So I'm mostly flying at VTOL while I get everything sorted out and get it all shaken out. And yeah, this is the project I've been working on. This took me so damn long to build, but because I'm just not as experienced with airplanes as I am with drones, and just there's a lot of steps. I don't know. There's a lot of steps in getting it set up, but it's done. I got a video tutorial. If you've ever wanted to build one of these and you wanted somebody like me to walk you through it, there's already plenty of tutorials. This is not a new platform. It's a very good platform. It's not a new platform. Guys like Painless 360 already have builds for this, but, some people like my particular take. And specifically, I think the people that I've seen do tutorials on it have used ArduPilot, which I will probably do someday because ArduPilot is pretty awesome. But right now, iNav. It's got iNav with VTOL, which is a thing that I don't know if many people have done a tutorial on. So anyway, that's why my office is a mess, because I've been working on this damn thing. And now that it's done, I'm so close to actually being able to enjoy it. Like, I just got the video transmitter. I did all my testing line of sight. I just got the video transmitter put in and getting that all squared away. And I'm really looking forward to actually being able to fly it and enjoy it, perhaps soon, someday, maybe. Anyway. There you go. That's what I've been up to. Oh, that's what I've been up to. What have you guys been up to? Blunty? Hey, Blunty! How you doing, man?
Hey,
long time
it's
no
me.
talk. Yeah, it is. How you been,
Long
man?
time. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been renovating a room in my house, so I just got done with that. Yeah. Not too much. Just chilling.
Playing any good video games? Surely.
Yeah. Good is relative. Stalker 2 came out, but it's kind of buggy.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Dylan.
And it's not really completed, and yeah, there's a lot of problems with Stalker 2, but.
Oh no. Dylan was so excited for Stalker 2, like the days leading up to it. Dylan's my son, for those of you who don't know. And he was just so excited. And then it turned out his computer is nowhere near powerful enough to even begin to think about playing it. Apparently it has high requirements. I don't know. Does it have high requirements? Yeah.
Yeah.
So unbeknownst to him, I'm actually going to upgrade his computer over Christmas, but obviously that doesn't help him play Stalker. So I said to him, well, we could put it on my laptop. And he was like, Dad, if my computer can't play it, if your laptop can't play it. I'm like, excuse me, I have a Razer Blade 16 with a 4080 in it. Don't tell me. You have a 1080 Ti in your desktop. Shut up. I get 120 frames. It's 2.7K resolution. Don't tell. So I put it on my laptop, and I was like, "Here, you may play." And he was like, "Oh." So that's what's been going on in my house. Yeah. Okay, but that's what's been going on with me. You know what? I want to hear more about what's going on with you, and specifically, I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your questions about FPV. You can ask your questions here in the chat. Blunty is queuing them up as we go. Mr. Wheezy, my kid does not watch my stream. I assure you I have not blown his Christmas present. Actually, it's a little bit of a surprise. It's going to be a little bit of a surprise. He's going to build it with me. We're going to build it together. So he has to, because I'm always trying to, with teenagers and preteens, there's any excuse you can to motivate them to do any gosh dang thing. You know, so it's like, would you rather I just give you a new computer? Yes, absolutely. No, you're going to build it with me. Aha, you might even learn how to build a computer. So as a father, that's how my mind works. Yeah, Blunty's queuing up the questions here in the queue. Got a few queued up already. We're, of course, going to be taking questions from the Discord server. Over here on the right side of my screen, these are my patrons. This is my Discord server. The coolest Discord server in all of FPV. I don't, just that's what people are saying. I didn't say that. That's what I hear people are saying. And if you want to, hit the dollar sign right down here. Leave a super chat. And that is the way to be pretty sure, almost 100% sure I'll read your question on stream. Other than that, it's entirely up to me and Blunty's discretion which questions we think are most interesting. And, of course, if I don't answer your question and you don't want to leave a super chat, don't feel bad. You can always email jb@joshuabardwell.com. Everybody's welcome to email. Don't want anybody to get salty about getting overlooked. But, you know, not every question will make the stream. So let's do it. And we'll start with this. Excuse me. We'll start with this question from Levi FPV, who says, "My solder joints keep forming peaks, even though I use a lot of flux and don't hold the iron on for too long. Any tips?" I have to say, so using flux, good, right? Don't use too much flux. You say I use a lot of flux. Excessive flux can cause issues. You should be using no clean flux. So normal solder flux is acidic, and if left on the board over time can cause degradation or damage. I'm not sure to what degree, like how long and how much, I don't know. But the rule of thumb is, the standard practice is that after using flux, you get a toothbrush or a soft bristled nylon brush with alcohol on it, and you scrub it and you rinse off the flux. If you use no clean flux, it is non-acidic and you don't have to clean it. Yay. Of course, that's what I do because I'm lazy. But if the flux is slightly conductive of electricity, so if you leave like a huge amount of flux on the board, you just glob it on, especially something like an ESC with full battery voltage on it, and then you plug in, the flux can create a short circuit and burn off, and sometimes it's harmless and sometimes it's not. So don't go hog wild on the flux, but you need some, but you don't need a ton. But I think what you might be doing is holding the iron on not long enough. Okay? And what I mean by that is that the solder will attempt to stay with the thing that's hot. Okay? So if you heat the wire, but you don't heat the pad underneath the wire, then the hottest thing in that interaction might be the soldering iron tip itself, because the wire may not hold much heat. And as you pull the iron away, the solder will try to stay on the iron. What you need is for the pad and the wire to get hot, so the solder kind of relaxes down into a ball, and then as you remove the iron, it stays there. There are other things that could be causing the problem, but my number one guess might be that you're not getting the pad hot enough, either because you're not waiting long enough for the heat to transfer to the pad, or because you're not physically contacting the pad. Especially with very small pads, it can be hard to kind of get the iron down and touch the pad and get the heat into the pad. So that's some thoughts about that. Why does the DJI remote not have any feedback on Betaflight even though it's already connected? Ryan Zhe. Ryan, I'm going to start, and you may have seen this video already. I don't want to pawn you off on a video, but I want to just let you know. This video exists, How to Bind DJI RC Controller to Betaflight by Joshua Bardwell. Search for that video. That video takes you through all of the steps, okay? So I'm not going to go through 25 minutes of steps on the live stream because that would bore everybody, and also I made a video. But one of the things that you'll run into is that when you file with an error message, shush up. When you, let's see here. When you flash Betaflight, by default, it will not include S-Bus support. It will only include Crossfire support. And what you'll see is that when you, okay, I've got an example of the no RSSI bars. I don't know that I do. And in your receiver tab, I want you to change the serial receiver provider from whatever it is to S-Bus. If it's already at S-Bus, good for you. Yeah, good. We're going to change it to S-Bus, and we're going to hit save and reboot. And then we go back to the receiver tab, and do you see... Yeah, okay, I don't show the... So if you go to the receiver tab, and instead of colored bars, you have nothing, no colored bars, that's this problem, and you need to do what I show in this video. The other thing that you need to do is enable the fast S-Bus option in Betaflight, and that's a command line option that may be messing you up. Those are the two main things that mess you up. I'm going to throw this video at you. I'm going to throw those two things at you. I'm going to cross my fingers, and I'm going to hope that's it. And if not, you can email me, and I'll try and get it sorted out. All right. Let's see here. Andrew Kennedy says, I'm currently building a quad. Everything is new out of the box. Should I update the software before doing any configuration, or what would you do? I probably would. I would very much like to make sure that everybody who buys a bind and fly drone, like a fully configured bind and fly drone from iFlight or GepRC, do not flash it when you get it. It came from the manufacturer, fully ready to go. If you flash it, you're going to wipe the config. It's going to be bad. Okay, so, but if you got a brand new flight controller with an old version of Betaflight on it, I'd probably update it. You got a brand new Radio Master Boxer, I'd probably update it to the latest version of EdgeTX. And an Express LS receiver, I probably would. Here's the thing though, you don't have to. The only one of those that I would kind of insist on is Betaflight 4.5. If it comes with 4.4 on it, I would flash it to 4.5. There's really no reason not to do that. But the controller, the Express LRS, those are areas where if you're not like really comfortable doing that, you may frustrate yourself and get yourself in a bad situation where you flash the controller and then it doesn't work and you don't know why. Now you're super annoyed. And frankly, the advantages of updating your EdgeTX from whatever it shipped with to the latest, the advantages of updating your Express LS receiver from whatever it shipped with to the latest are probably minimal. But the advantages of updating the flight controller to the latest Betaflight is probably worth it. And the chances of screwing up a Betaflight flash are relatively low. So that's my advice there. What charger do you use for 8S? Asks Flexo3D. There are two chargers I would have you look at today for 8S. They're not the only ones, but these are the two that sort of stand out to me. And one is the ISDT Air 8. That's the one I actually use. It's $60. So it's a really inexpensive 8S charger. And it's ISDT, so it's fairly good quality. It's a single channel charger, 500 watts, 20 amps. Doesn't have an AC adapter. You need a DC power supply. So it's not going to be for everybody. But for $60, you can charge 8S batteries. Voila. The other one is, I think Hoda just released one. Is it the T8? Yes, it is. The Hoda T8. And this one is also $60. It is it a two-channel charger? No, it's a single-channel charger, 650 watts, 22 amps, so slightly better specs than the ISDT. Hoda, also a very reputable brand. I don't know that there's a lot to differentiate these guys other than the form factor. What's this here? Has it got a servo checker? Servo tester? I don't know what that output is. That's interesting. It's a temperature sensor, maybe? Interesting. I don't know what that is. But both of them are an 8S charger. it's got a 5 volt 1 amp. Who cares? 5 volt 2.1 amps. I guess it's useful for something, but nice integrated power supply. That's nice. The Hoda, you can get an integrated power supply instead of a third-party power supply. That's clever. Spend a little money. The multifunction port doesn't say what that is. So either of those is a good choice. The ISDT Air 8 is the one I use because the Hoda didn't exist at the time. Today I might buy the Hoda, but that's what I would point you towards. It is not a new gaming chair. It is the same gaming chair I've had for years. Probably literally years. That's a really open-ended question. Motors, frames, etc. Can you list all the other unknown components required to build a drone from 0 to 100? I don't know if I can. Blunty, you may have tagged... I don't know if you tagged this because you thought I was going to answer it, or if you tagged it because it's an opportunity to plug my website. If it's an opportunity to plug my website, I'm going to pass right this minute. I'm actually in the process of redoing my whole website. And once the devs started working on the new website, I completely stopped updating the old website. And that was like 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I'm not sure. So I'm kind of a little bit like, it's still there. I'm not taking it down, but I'm also not like going out of my way to point to it because... So I'm hoping people are sending me emails and they're like, hey, there's this typo on the website. And I'm like, thank you for letting me know. I really appreciate your attention to the detail there. And then I'm like, yeah, but I'm just going to rewrite the whole thing anyway. So it's not like I'm going to fix it. But it's not ready yet. So I'm not going to plug the website because I'm a little embarrassed by it right now. There we go. I'm running a Speedy B Wing flight controller, Jacob Stringfellow, in that airplane. I am not. Today... If you were going to build a wing to run iNav... Hang on one second. If you were going to build a wing today, I got to tell you, there are 2 flight controllers I would have you look at. The first one would be the Speedy B F405 Wing flight controller. It is an F405, so it's going to run basically iNav. Technically, Betaflight does have some wing support, but it's not really, you're not going to run, it's not ready for prime time. I should say, Ivan Efimov is working on improving Betaflight's wing code for Betaflight 4.6, and maybe in Betaflight 4.6 it will be worth a damn. But today, iNav is the way to go if you're going to build a wing with a flight controller. Or ArduPilot, which is fantastic, but an F405 won't run ArduPilot. I'm so sure. I'd be amazed if someone told me that it could. So, oh my God, shut up. Shut your mouth. I swear I would have lost money. An F405 can run ArduPilot? How? It says right here, it runs ArduPilot. How? I'm astounded. I'm astounded. Well, okay, fine. It can run ArduPilot. Well, there you go. The other one I would look at is the Maytech H743 Wing. And honestly, the Maytech H743 Wing is overkill for a lot of things. But it's got the kitchen sink, man. It's got the kitchen sink, dual camera inputs with a camera switcher, so you can have like a downward facing camera and a forward facing camera. It's got multiple I2C outputs. It's got tons of motor outputs. It's just got everything you could ask for, and it's like twice the price. No, it's like $100. This flight controller is like $100. So like you should buy the Speedy B. The Speedy B also comes with the pins pre-soldered. Maytech, what do you? I don't want to do this, Maytech. I don't want to do this. I don't want to solder these pins, Maytech. I'm not doing it. I direct soldered all the wires on this plane because I'm not doing it. I'm not soldering pins. It's not 2017. I'm not doing it. Ship it to me with the pins pre-soldered or get the hell out of here. So those are the 2 I would suggest. And for most people, the Speedy B is going to be the one to go because the additional price of the Maytech just doesn't justify what it brings to the table, although it's a very good flight controller. The Maytech is an H743. So it's also a more powerful processor. And again, I'm shocked that an F405 can run ArduPilot. It seems like there must be compromises there, but I just don't know. I would have said it couldn't do it at all, and I was wrong about that. So maybe I'm wrong about this. What? It doesn't come with the pins soldered? Shut up. Not only is it shown with the pins soldered, someone I talked to who used it in a build said it came with the pins soldered. Well, anyway, still, it's a lot cheaper. So either one of those would be good depending on what you need. If you're running, yeah. Coming up on the half-hour marker, and that's usually where I will start doing Super Chats. We have only had one Super Chat since the stream began. It's from our old friend, Guillermo Nespolo. I can't find spare parts for a Bahatanga 5000. Me neither. I don't even know what a Bahatanga 5000 is. I went to Tijuana once. I got a Bahatanga 5000. Had to get a course of antibiotics afterwards. No, I don't. Yeah. Thank you for the donation.
I asked in chat ahead of time because I figured you would be like, I have no idea what that is. So.
Correct. You know me so well, Blunty. We've been
does not show up on Google either.
Friends for so long. Okay, so that's it. We have no more Super Chats. If you guys want, I'll check back in another 10 minutes. If you guys suddenly I'm going to answer Super Chats. If you guys suddenly get inspired to leave Super Chats, I'll do another run through the Super Chats in about 10 minutes. But in the meantime, I'll just go back to answering questions. And Alexander Barker, it says, is he answering questions from Discord or what? Well, a little bit of everything, Alexander. But YouTube chat, Discord, just a little bit of everything. I answered your question just now. So, here's a question from Raivi in the Discord. What's the opinion on the Hello Radio AI with voice control and gyro for pitch and roll control? Hello Radio AI. Oh, good. The very first video is from Drone Camps.
That was the linked video as well.
Has anyone else reviewed this damn thing? Why are there no actual... This is Hello AI. Why are there no actual Hello Radio Sky V16? I see. It's the Hello Radio Sky V16 is the name of it. So this is a Jumper T16 clone. I think I've heard of this company. I don't know if this is true. I thought I heard a rumor. It's a rumor. So take that as you will. That this was some ex-Radio Master employees or ex-Jumper employees or something that basically ripped it off and now they're trying to sell it. The big question is they've added this touchscreen AI voice control. Is that an official EdgeTX feature? Like if I want to update this, what target is it? Because if it doesn't run an official version of EdgeTX, then you're kind of in trouble if you ever need to flash firmware on it. So I'm going to look and try and figure it out. I'm not that impressed with some new feature. I just want a good solid radio that's going to work for me. And then I'll worry about new features. Radio firmware EdgeTX. Well, that doesn't really tell us anything. It could be just a fork of EdgeTX. Oh, yeah, this is clearly bullshit. Really beautiful radio. Superior finish to the Radio Master TX16 Pro. Yeah, as if. I mean, it is shiny. But I want to see the solder joints. That's what I want to see. The solder joints. Similar to the famous AGO1 gimbal. Are they? Are they? I don't know. So my question would be, motion control is an officially supported feature. This AI upgraded metal buttons as standard. So it's basically just a TX16S or a Radio Master T16. Oh yeah, I'm going to run it off of AA batteries for sure. Duracells. Definitely. Yeah.
They have
Cute.
a website, but it is not working currently. They have a firmware link, but then it just errors out with the under construction page.
Not encouraging. So my concern would be, here's my concern. Maybe this is a good product, but it's an unknown. It's an unknown. This is a company that, who is this company? Don't know. A lot of times in China, what will happen is some employees from a company will break off. They'll take the IP. They'll clone the product. Sometimes it's the same employees just trying to start a new company because the other one has a problem, or there's all kinds of weird shenanigans that go on with business. So we don't know who this company is. We don't know what their customer support is going to be like. We don't know what their quality control is going to be like. And like, what are they offering? Right? Well, is it a better radio than a TX16S for a lower price? Or are you giving something up? I feel like you're taking a gamble when you buy it. And I would definitely want to be sure that it was running a standard version of EdgeTX. This touchscreen AI voice control, is that a standard EdgeTX feature? Or am I going to be stuck with a firmware that I can't update? Am I going to be stuck with a product that if there's a problem, I can't get customer service? These are all things that would give me pause before I bought this. Instead of like, as good customer service and as good quality control as you can really expect in this hobby from a company like Radio Master. So, AI voice control. I don't like, I don't know, man. Who cares? That's what I need. I've always wanted to be able to talk to my radio. I don't even know what that is. Like, maybe I'm just cynical, but that's like, I hate the fact that they use the term AI immediately. I hate you, and I just don't want to buy your product. The minute you tell me it has AI, I'm like, okay, that's a buzzword. Anyway, whatever. Got a couple super chats that have come in. I'll go ahead and read them. Generic Equivalent asks, my AIO with Express LS UART connects to my radio, but not Betaflight. Also missing yaw roll pitch throttle in the sensor screen on the radio. In the sensor screen? In the sensor screen? Does that mean you're not getting telemetry? In the sensor screen? That's weird.
Oh, yeah, telemetry. That has to be telemetry, right?
Well, yeah. So was throttle position normally in the telemetry? The radio doesn't need the telemetry to tell it the throttle position. That's weird. If you've got an all-in-one with a built-in Express LRS receiver, then the good news is that you know the wiring is correct. So it's got to be the ports tab. You got to have serial RX on the wrong port, or you don't, or you got your receiver tab misconfigured. But it should be correct. I would consider reflashing it and resetting it to defaults. That's what I would consider that. Just so it would reset the ports tab.
Yeah, just don't forget with Express LRS too, especially with the AIOs, it can be hard to tell what light is what. It's typically the green LED that's showing you the status of the receiver. But you just want to make sure to go into the Express LRS Lewis script under the tools menu of the radio and double check that you have a solid C in the top right corner of the Lewis script. Sometimes you'll have a flashing C, and that'll help you diagnose that you have an error that you're connected, but you have like a model match error, or you have like an arming switch in the wrong position. Valid.
Yeah.
And that'll completely rule out any of the connection. Then you'll know 100% like, hey, that solid C means we're connected, and we know the wiring's right. It has to be Betaflight settings.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully that gets you moving in the right direction. Black Jungle, good to see you again, sir. Dropping by to thank you for all you do and let you know apparently I'll be doing some MDF frames now just to make you horrified. I am horrified. Don't get them wet. That stuff will crumble. Zip369, thank you for a $5 super chat. I live by a Navy base. Most of my local town is special use airspace. How does one get permission to fly there? Is Part 107 and a valid reason required? Zip, I don't know the specifics of your airspace, but in general, I would say you're boned, dude. You're boned. You will not get permission to fly there. Like, I don't know exactly what kind of airspace you have, but if you live by a Navy base, there are all kinds of restrictions, and it's unlikely you're going to get approval to fly unless you, like, know somebody. It's not like you're just going to walk up and knock on somebody's door, or maybe you can. Because the thing is, like, in my experience, not that I have a huge amount of experience, but in my experience with military bases, if you can find the right guy and ask for permission, you can usually get it. But, like, that guy might be someone you don't have access to, or someone who has no interest in helping you. So probably you're not going to get that permission. What I would recommend you do is there is an app. The app is called UAS Sidekick. UAS Sidekick. Actually, it's UA Sidekick. They reused the S. And UAS Sidekick, if you just, tap on your location, right? And then let me find a military base. Is there a military base near me? Not near me. How about I don't. Like here. So here is a military base, okay? And if I tap and drop a pin somewhere in that location, it will tell me whether there's flight restrictions in that area, okay? Now, sometimes when there are flight restrictions, the app will say, tap to request LANC approval. If the app says tap to request LANC approval, you can request LANC approval, and then if you get approval, you can fly under certain restrictions. But in general, if you're near a military base, it'll just say restricted airspace, you may not fly, and that's just the end of the story for you. So I would, for most people, the simplest thing to do is to download the UAS Sidekick app, and then if it says you're good to go, you're good to go. And if it says you can't fly, you probably can't fly. And then if you decide that you like, oh, but I want to get an exception so that I can fly my drone within the Class B airspace of this airport, there are ways to make that happen, but they're outside the scope of what a normal person would do. Blunty, anything to add to that answer? I know this is a topic you know a thing or two about.
No, you got where I was going. Just try to file LANC and see if they let you fly there.
And like an app like that will either say you can try to apply for LANC approval or you can't, and that's just that, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned Part 107. There's not really a difference. I mean, you can get waivers under Part 107, but you would need to be doing some commercial operation and then explain that under the waiver process to attempt to get a waiver. And like you'd have to have a special reason to be in that location, not just like I live here.
Yeah. Well, and the normal 107 waiver process might not even apply to like special restricted military airspace, right?
I think there's a separate section like of the waivers for that, but I don't know that it is approved. Like, because there has to be people that perform tasks in there, like for instance, rescue and recovery people, and there's different people that would use drones there, and they use the 107 as well. So
yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, like someone is flying a drone on a military base. I guess I thought. And I don't know, but I thought it would be kind of like, when you're on a military base, there's the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which handles all the radio frequency shit in the U.S. And then when you go onto a military base, there's a local spectrum coordinator. And so if you were going to transmit, you wouldn't necessarily go, you would need to be compliant with the FCC, of course, but you also would have to go through the local spectrum. And I would assume that when you're on a military base, there is also a local airspace coordinator, right? Clearly. So then if you were to say, you couldn't just go to the FAA and say, I want a waiver. And the FAA might go, okay, here's your waiver. Well, you still need to coordinate with the military base before you fly in their airspace. So it's basically not worth the trouble unless you have a really specific reason for wanting to fly there, and just living there isn't a good enough reason.
Northern Tier FPV points out, I don't know about that app. Does that app show active TFRs in the location? I would assume it does.
Yes, it does. I can confirm it does, because Like if you put it on Washington, D.C., it shows the perpetual Washington TFR.
I would just say, like, if you are really, especially the first time and you live there, I would just like double check there's no active TFR for your location that's separate and doesn't happen to show up on the app. Maybe it only updates every 24 hours, or you know what I mean? Like, don't rely on. But you could also check multiple apps for what they say. Like, there's multiple apps.
It does. So, warning, flight restricted airspace, Washington, D.C., FRZ, and then warning, flight restricted airspace, TFR. Schedule dates from X to Y, starts X date, ends Y date. So, yes, it absolutely does show TFRs. Anyway. Yeah, put it on Washington, D.C. There's so many flight restrictions. You can't even fucking believe it. It's got a separate... It's pretty cool, actually. It's got this sections at the top for the TFRs. There's a section here about the special flight rules area for Washington, D.C. And then there's controlled airspace, Class B airspace for the Washington, D.C. airport. And then they've got a separate section for the stadium flight restrictions in the area, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty comprehensive. All right. Great. Back to the questions. Yeah, God forbid your drone, hits a Black Hawk. That's going to be a real bad day for you. And some other people, but you specifically. Don't screw around. Don't screw around.
Yeah, it's also worth noting one other thing is, for instance, that app will not show you a training path that is set up based like for instance, if you look at a real air chart, there's 9 p.m. there's flights over this area of a military base because you're outside the area. I live near one in Alabama, and we have helicopters that do lower than 400 feet training, but it's only certain times a day and it's all marked out on a schedule. So I wouldn't 100% guarantee that any app has a local military base's schedule for that either. So just things to consider is don't just trust the app, go fly, and then hit a plane. But
for sure. All right, enough said. Let's see here. Does a 5-inch drone frame work with a Crux 3.5? You're talking about taking the motors and so forth from a Crux 3.5 and putting them on a 5-inch frame? I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's going to be heavier at the very least. It's not going to have good results. I mean, I think you probably could get it to fly. You'd have to extend all the wires. It'd be a giant pain in the ass. So if I understand your question, I would say don't do it. But it probably would fly. My goodness. OCDFPV. OCDFPV says this app doesn't work. Just put it on top of an airport 5 miles from me and it said clear to fly. Oh, everybody, the app is now... This OCDFPV says the app doesn't work. Oh, scrap the whole thing. Come on, OCD. What airport is it, OCD? I'm going to look it up. I'm going to assume it's user error, but tell me the app. Tell me the airport, OCDFPV. I'm going to look it up and we're going to see what happens. It's just why are people like this, Blunty? This app does not work, everybody! Stop what you're doing! I did one thing and it didn't come out like I expected it to. Scrap the entire thing! No, everyone just jumps to conclusions. The whole app is fucked, everybody! Calm down. Linden, Missouri. Okay, so I got an airport here in Linden, Missouri, around Flint, Michigan. Is that the one? I got an airport here, Waterford Township, Michigan, not Missouri. M-O-M-I. Which airport is it? Waterford Township? Potomac? Not Potomac. Which one? Pontiac? What's the name of the town? Tell me. I'm lazy. Linden. Okay. Well, you looking at Price's Airport? Price's Airport? Yeah, it doesn't appear that there's a no-fly zone there. That is uncontrolled airspace. Now, it says there's an airport there, but that's uncontrolled airspace. You want to know why? I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess that's an untowered airport. Untowered airports? Oh, shit, Blunty. It's been so long since I took the test, Blunty. I'm going to fuck this up. Untowered airports are Class G airspace, right? Is that right? Blunty, help me. Yeah, so like right here, we have an airport. You go ahead, Blunty.
Hold on. I got to pull up the diagram.
Okay, so right here we have an untowered airport. The app says this is uncontrolled airspace. And you're saying, well, it's an airport. Clearly it must be controlled airspace. That's an incorrect assumption. Not all airports are in controlled airspace. The app is correct. That is uncontrolled airspace. Now, does that mean you're allowed to go crash into a plane? And you can be like, oh no, the app said I was good to fly. No, there are still rules and still restrictions, but the app is correct that you are allowed to fly here.
Yeah, correct. A non-towered airport with no instrument approach is a Class G airspace.
Right. No active advisories, authorization not required. Prior to flight, the remote pilot must assess local airspace and any flight restrictions. You are clear to fly. You may fly near that airport. You must give way to manned aircraft traffic just like always, but you're good to fly. So the app is not broken. The app is fine. You just didn't understand what you were looking at, as I assumed. Just wait 5 seconds before you just jump to conclusions. Jesus. Why are people like this? It's the internet. The internet has ruined our attention span. I'm even being a jerk about it. Why am I being like this? Why not just be gracious? Anyway, let's move on. I'm done with this. Jack Brock asks, I upgraded to Express LS recently, and I was wondering, can Express LS interfere with analog video? Well, any transmitter can interfere with your video. The frequency of Express LS and analog video are pretty far apart, 2.4 to 5.8 gigahertz. So it's unlikely that you're getting radio interference, but you can pick up interference in the wires, especially if the antenna is close to the wires. So yes, absolutely that can happen. The first thing I would do is I would try to make sure that the wires of the Express LS receiver are not anywhere near the video transmitter antenna or the video wire. It's pretty unusual because lots of quads run those wires close together and don't have an issue. But that's probably what I think is happening. And it's totally plausible. Is the BLHeli32 firmware in the Secure ESC you just tested good? Mine came with AM32 on it. So that's the Secure 32, the Secure bind and fly drone that I just released a video about. My said AM32. I would recommend buying it with AM32. You can buy it with the BLHeli32 test version. I don't recommend you do that. It's like, who knows what the deal is with that firmware. And the bottom line is that BLHeli32 is a dead end. You cannot practically speaking update a BLHeli32 ESC to new firmware today. Yes, technically there are things you can do, hoops you can jump through to make it happen, but it's really not feasible for the majority of people, especially because the who's going to make the firmware in the first place, right? So I would just get out of the BLHeli32 ecosystem and get the AM32 ESC, and that's then don't worry about the BLHeli32. Bailey Case asks, why are bind and flies cheaper to buy versus buying the individual parts? That's been true for a long time. Bind and flies take advantage of economies of scale. If you buy one motor or 4 motors, you pay a higher price than if you buy 400 motors or 4,000 motors. And the difference is substantial. Substantial. If you're willing to buy even 50 or 100 motors, and I'm not making this up, literally, you could reach out to an OEM manufacturer right now, and you could get a 25 to 30% discount on the price of the motors, just like that. Frankly, if you're you don't even have to OEM the motors. You can just go to T-Motor or, well, I don't know about iFlight. iFlight, it's a little weird with their wholesalers, but you could just go to your favorite motor manufacturer, RC and Power, T-Motor, etc., and you could say, I want to place a bulk order, and they immediately will give you a discount. And that discount, I'm not committing them to a certain number, but I would assume it would be in the range of 20-25% at least off of retail. And if you're doing an order of thousands, you're going to get as much as maybe 40% markdown from retail, maybe even a little more than that. So that $25 motor, you're going to pay $15 for it, maybe even a little bit less. Okay? And so then a bind and fly manufacturer buys hundreds or thousands of motors. They do the same thing with the flight controllers. They do the same thing with all the components. And then they have labor. And that labor is in a low cost of living country, right, where labor is cheap. So that drone is built by someone whose labor isn't very expensive. And the net result is that it's cheaper to buy the bind and fly than it is to buy the individual components. That's why. AM32 doesn't have filtering. What are you talking about, Curtis Hayes? Since when do ESCs have filtering? Blunty, do ESCs have filtering? Because I would think that like a low-pass filter or something would add delay, which you wouldn't want. Does BLA32 have like filtering? Does Blue Jay have filtering?
No, not that I know of.
Yeah, what is Curtis Hayes talking about? There's nothing to filter. Well,
you're getting a motor signal from Betaflight, and you're getting back EMF from the motor to do the position, but there's no reason that you would have filtering because you're not getting a gyro signal or any information to Betaflight that would be used for any control. So
all the filtering is in Betaflight on the PID controller. I don't know. I mean, maybe we're misunderstanding what Curtis is saying, but I don't think AM30 doesn't have filtering. Only use it on well-built quads. I don't think any ESCs have filtering. They definitely got filters.
Not a thing. And then if you're thinking about bidirectional D-shot, that's also not the case. It does support that, which allows filtering based on RPM.
Almac says BLA32 has some filtering. I'm really surprised to learn that. Barrett Thompson says BLA32 had filtering. Well, learn something new every day. Apparently, we're learning this from Madstech. Oh, I see. So all of you guys are repeating the same fact from the same person, which doesn't mean it's not true, but it does mean that the fact that all of you guys are saying it's only a sample size of one. Madstech said it. Madstech is often right about technical stuff, but sometimes he's not. So
here's what I'm going to say. I bet it doesn't make any fucking difference for your drone. Sorry. But I get really frustrated because people bring up really niche bullshit a lot, and then everybody thinks it's a big deal, and then it's not, and nobody cares, and it will never be different for you, and you won't be able to tell. If you fly D-Shot 150, it will be no different to D-Shot 600 for you, but you think you need it. Like, stuff like that. It's just like, it was very annoying, you know, like, oh, you can't do this because it might happen in this, and it happens in one quad out of 1,000, and nobody cares, and you've changed your build for it, and I don't know. That stuff drives me up the wall. So I'm not saying Mads did that. I'm just saying that the response in chat seems like one of those situations, and it'd be interesting to see if it really is.
That is a thing that Madstech does, and I love Madstech, and I have the utmost respect for him. So now if I talk a little bit of shit about him, hopefully he gets taken in a friendly spirit. But there is a thing that he does where he identifies a real problem that affects a tiny, tiny minority of people, and then he blasts it to the world. And I'm not saying he's wrong to do that. If it's like, hey, 1 out of every 5,000 cars blows up and lights on fire because of a defect. Well, you got to get the word out, right? But sometimes it feels like you're also going to say, hey guys, there's a recall that affects 1 out of every 5,000 cars. We're doing a full recall in case yours is the one. And if it happens to you, your car's going to blow up and you're going to die. You're like, oh shit. But then that it doesn't always feel like the enthusiasm with which he announces the problem is proportional to the magnitude of the outcome or the probability of the outcome. I'll say that. So I don't know how that relates to the filtering thing.
And then
it seemed like it did when I started talking.
Neither of us have seen the video, and this is a response to chat's response to the video that we have no idea about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have a bad build, your filtering should be in the flight controller, which filters the gyro data. I don't see any reason to have filtering on the motor inputs. but I'm not an ESC designer, so maybe it's the same kind of, it's not the same kind of filtering like in a PID loop. They're hitch filters to adapt to different current changes and spikes. Oh, I'd like to know more about these filters. I guess is all I'm saying. Anyway. What do you think about the Mobula 6 2024? I like it. I think it's good. Simple question, simple answer. I am planning on moving from the DJI FPV to actual FPV. How easy or difficult to fly is the QAV S2 JB Edition? If you can fly the DJI FPV in full manual mode, you can fly the QAV S2 JB Edition. If you can't, you should practice in the simulator. How reliable are products from AliExpress? That's like saying, how reliable are things that I buy in the world? Right? How reliable is food that I buy from a store? Well, I don't know. Did you buy it from a 3 Michelin star restaurant? Did you buy it from a grocery store? Did you buy it from a vendor giving you expired meat out of a cooler on the side of the road? AliExpress is a humongous marketplace with everything from top tier to absolute crap. You have to just know what you're buying and who you're buying it from. And it's always a bit of a crapshoot, but a lot of people feel that they get good value and that they get what they expect. There's no way to generalize that, though.
I will say I've seen a lot of Western people assume that AliExpress is somewhere you're buying from, and
Right.
it's not the case. You're buying from vendors, just like
Right.
an Amazon, but a foreign Amazon.
Right. Well, but the difference is that Amazon also is they have their own warehouses and they have fulfilled by Amazon. So you are in fact buying from Amazon some of the time. Whereas with AliExpress, I don't know if that's true. Yes, no?
I don't know if that's true or not. I've never purchased there.
I think with AliExpress, you're always buying from a vendor. That AliExpress is just they're the flea market that people set tables up in, but they don't actually have a table of their own, I guess. So it's a bit of a crapshoot. But you're not buying from AliExpress, as Blunty points out. You're buying from an individual store, and your experience will depend on that store and the product the store is selling. It absolutely is sometimes the case that products on AliExpress are counterfeit. Now, it's not, going back to what I said about maybe Madstech sometimes blowing things out of proportion. It's not frequent, but like there was an incident where some Rush tank solo VTXs, and it's not like it was a Roche tank duo. It wasn't like just some Chinese clone. It was labeled as a Rush tank solo, and it was not made by Rush, and Rush put out a statement saying these are fake, don't buy them. And likewise, Maytech has made a statement about the H743, saying if you bought an H743 from AliExpress, it probably was a counterfeit. So it's a little bit of the Wild West, but you know, some people like buying from them. Hey Bardwell, can you give me your thoughts on the Datone Mamba stack? I'm wanting to use it for my next build, but I want to be sure. Datone Mamba have been great flight controllers. The question is, does Datone still exist? I heard rumors a while back, and I don't like. There's always rumors. Some people were like, "No, we can't order Datone anymore," and people were like, Datone. Somebody got arrested. Somebody got in trouble, yada, yada, yada. Well, let's go to the source. Datone Mamba stack. Nope, sold out. Cannot buy. The website still exists. That's something. Datone flight controller. Oh, add to cart. Hang on. Okay. Well, I mean, there you go. Add to cart. Okay. Add to cart. Okay. So they do exist. I don't know what all that nonsense was about. Yeah, it's good. It's good hardware. It's good hardware. Absolutely. Let's try to focus on some questions from the Discord. These guys pay the bills. Can ChatGPT tune your drone? What do you think about Mark Spatz's video? Can ChatGPT tune your drone? No, first of all. No, but okay, I'll bite Mark Spatz. Can ChatGPT tune my drone? No, it can't. It's a large language model. It doesn't know shit about tuning drones, but okay, so let's see what the hook is.
Tune and troubleshoot our drone flight performance. Can it help us with PID tuning, filter tuning? Can it give us advice? I've been using ChatGPT more and more. Okay, so with all this, making up a little prompt, basically taking word for word, but expanding on it a little bit because I did have to look up some of the components. It wasn't in his post. He kind of just related to the video, and I had to go do that myself. Recently built a 5-inch quad. It's supposed to be able to carry a large GoPro. Drone is over more than when I I can point flight back. T-mode beta flight as we should look at. Okay, so it sounds like you're struggling with additional weight of the GoPro, leading to issues like oscillations.
Nope. Adding weight effectively reduces the P gain. So when you add weight, it absolutely happens that you tune your quad with a GoPro on, and then when you take the GoPro off, the weight of the GoPro was kind of damping the response. It was slowing down the response of the quad, and so you get P-term oscillations when you remove the GoPro, but if it's oscillating when you add the GoPro, that would not indicate that you should reduce P gains. This advice is absolutely backwards, in my opinion. Increase D gains, maybe. It could be that adding the GoPro, if the GoPro has a flexible mount, that the GoPro mount is creating oscillation and wobble. In that case, reducing P gains could work. But that's a bit of a stretch from what it said. Throttle PID. Betaflight already has very aggressive throttle PID attenuation by default.
Overcompensation
hard to imagine
and
it going higher.
There's more adjustments you can make to try to improve.
It says you can start by reducing the throttle P gain. That's not a thing. Throttle P gain doesn't exist.
Improve flight performance. That's very true. So the PID tuning part says reduce P.
Increase filtering. I mean, maybe.
Gains, especially with on
it's just, but this is always what happens with ChatGPT. Blunty and I did a ChatGPT troubleshooting. There's always some simply wrong or bad or irrelevant advice, like check motor direction and propellers. Not relevant. If it flies, it flies. The motor direction and the props are correct. Adding the GoPro doesn't change that. That's simply wrong. Check that your ESCs are tuned to handle the additional weight. That sentence doesn't even mean anything. How are you going to tune your ESCs to handle the additional weight? The ESCs are just going to do their thing. So there's advice that's simply irrelevant. There's advice that is actually backwards from the truth. And then there's advice that kind of sort of, if you already knew the answer, would seem correct. And if you don't know what you're doing, then there's no way to discern those things, and it's just not very freaking helpful. What was his conclusion?
And information on controls, like what does this thing do, what's that do, what are some general characteristics, but to troubleshoot specific flight performance things, like if you wanted to know more about the sliders, what do they do, what's the effect of increasing sliders, decreasing sliders, what does it mean by raising the filtering or lowering the filtering, what do I have to do to increase my filter?
All right, so no, it can't.
Can I just add to what you were saying?
Yeah.
I'm seeing a big trend of people, new pilots especially, that are asking ChatGPT questions about FPV and using that to guide their information. Like a lot. I had a guy the other day kill a camera because he put VBAT to a 5-volt camera because ChatGPT told him to do it. And I've had many users waste hours on ChatGPT information that is either not real or has, like, they've wiped their drone without backup. All kinds of things happen, right, because of ChatGPT's information. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to point out is that I think I've figured out what's going on here, and or at least part of it. And I believe the reason is because we have a lot of tech people who get into this hobby. who get into FPV after doing some base form of tech, and typically that involves some sort of programming, some base programming. And what they're doing is they're using ChatGPT for programming, where it's not a harm. You get a piece of code, you put the code into the test, you run it, and it breaks or it doesn't break, right? It gives you an error on a line, you spit that back at ChatGPT, you go back and forth. But FPV drones are real-life pieces of equipment and are very complicated versus like code that can be parsed back and forth and tested very quickly. And so what we're seeing is this disconnect by people understanding how good it is for code in some situations if you understand it and know its limitations. But for FPV, it's much more limited because a wrong piece of information wastes hours or breaks a drone.
There's a lot more information fed in about programming than about FPV is the other thing. So the knowledge base is larger. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that was just my point. It's like, you really got to understand the disconnect, and that, you know, like ChatGPT is going to hurt you much more if it's wrong in our hobby versus other situations.
It's weird because like sometimes it's so good. I was trying to sort an Excel pivot table a certain way the other day, and my wife said, I would just ask ChatGPT if it were me. And I was like, okay. And I asked ChatGPT, and it gave me the correct answer instantly, and it did exactly what I wanted. And I had been Googling, and I just could not figure out the right combination of words to Google to get the answer that I wanted. And I was like, okay. But like you said, Blunty, if I ChatGPT that answer, and then I try it and it doesn't work, zero harm done, just a little bit of time wasted. But if I try and answer a question about how to wire up a drone, and then I fry it and I blow my camera, that's different. So, yeah. So you gotta know what the tool is good for and what it's not good for, I guess is what I would say. Do you know of any 3-inch 6S freestyle bind and fly with the O3 Air? I know of some 3.6-inch ones, which is just about the same. Are they 6S? First of all, I don't think there's a lot of point in going 6S on a 3-inch. Maybe a 3.6-inch, though. Is this available in 6S? I think it's 4S. I think it's 4S. No, it's 6S. Yay, there you go. So here's what I would steer you toward. The GEP-RC Domain 3.6 HD is a great choice. It's not quite a 3-inch, but it's pretty good. Pretty close. Axis Flying has an Argus. Axis Flying 3.5, 3.6. Manta 3.6. There you go. Axis Flying has a 3.6-inch Manta. Does it also come with 6S? I think it does. We'll double check. Hello. 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 What if I just Control S 6S? Yeah, 6S battery. So that's another one that you could consider. I'm not sure which of those is better and worse, but both of them are pretty solid and worth checking out. Let's see here. Didn't my Bandit video mention that some new features were coming for the Radiomaster Bandit? Did we ever learn that that was? I don't think we did. Nope. But thank you for asking. We got any more super chats, Plenty? Just a couple. Rich McKay Reed asks, what's normally required or best practice for winter flying with snow on the ground and freezing temps? So one concern is waterproofing. You're going to want to conformal coat the quad thoroughly. You want to be aware that there are things you can't get conformal coating on, or it will ruin them. Your USB port, any plug needs to have something plugged into it so the conformal doesn't get on it. Your barometer, if you have a barometer, needs to be taped over, and more. I'm not going to go over the complete list right here. There's videos out there about conformal coating. You could also use something like the Flywoo spray. Now this stuff is interesting. The Flywoo hydrophobic spray. This stuff keeps water off your drone, but you can just spray it anywhere, and it doesn't break anything. Well, that sounds pretty good. What's the trade-off? There's always a trade-off. The trade-off is that you're expected to apply it every time you fly. So the reason you can spray this stuff on connectors and it doesn't ruin the connectors is it's very easy to just scrape off. So when you plug the connector in, it just basically scrapes it off. But that also means that while you're flying and crashing and landing and handling your drone, it's getting scraped off. So the idea here is you buy this bottle and you just spritz it all over your electronics, and then they're protected, theoretically. It's like clearly not going to be as good a protection as conformal coating, but it's going to be a lot easier to live with. And then the other thing is your batteries, you need to keep them warm. If your batteries get cold, the performance is going to be terrible. So keep your batteries in a warm car. You could get heated battery bags. Some people use little hand warmers to keep the batteries warm. Some people put them in their pockets or inside their jacket. Let their body heat keep them warm. But if the batteries are freezing cold, not only will the battery perform badly, but it'll also potentially be damaged when you try to use it. So those are some things to think about. Rex FPV, thank you for a $5 super chat. 2 separate 5-inch that run stock Betaflight 443 fly great. Updated to 4.5 and my packs don't fly as long, get hot, and motors are noticeably hotter. Any thoughts? I don't think there's that many differences between 443 and 4.5 in terms of the filtering and the PIDs. Are you sure the filtering and the PIDs are identical?
Yeah, it was very small changes. Like iTerm got like reduced a little bit, I think. Like just a couple other small things. Like you can even copy a PID profile over from 4.4 to 4.5. So.
Yeah. So I would make absolutely sure there were no sneaky settings in your filters and PIDs that were causing that difference, because there wasn't a really big changes between 4.4 and 4.5 in terms of the PID loop. There just wasn't.
Yes. Just throwing it out there. Make sure you're running bidirectional D-shot if you're not, because that's like something pretty easy that can reduce filtering that would cause something like that.
Yeah. Okay. We got a 79,000 IDR super chat. Which digital system is better for range and penetration, DJI or walk snail? I mean, especially with the DJI 04 coming out, I think most people would say DJI. It's really hard to get an accurate apples to apples test there. For example, walk snail has the GT video transmitter with 2 watts. And I've heard people say that that's roughly on par with the 03. But then DJI has the 04 coming, who knows when. Soon, probably. Nobody knows the actual date. Frankly, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already, with as long as it's been since the leak started. But DJI does what they're going to do. So the 04 is in the Avata 2. And it has even better performance. So I think most people would say DJI under most circumstances. However, number one, if you're doing true long range, like 10 kilometers, 30 kilometers out, DJI will hit a wall. It's a software-based wall where they won't go any further. The actual value varies between 20 and 30 kilometers depending on the hardware you're using. If you're going to go past, say, 20 kilometers, walk snail might win because DJI hits that wall. And then walk snail also has the GT with the 2-watt output, which may give it a little bit of an edge. But in general, I think DJI is going to be the one that's going to win for you. Thank you, Yosferos, for a $100 super chat. And a happy Thanksgiving. You're very generous of you, as always, and very much appreciated. I'm thankful for your generosity. Single-handedly holding up my revenue. What can an F7 or an H7 do that an F4 cannot? F7 and H7 are faster processors than F4. They also have more program memory, so they can hold more code, larger code, and they run faster, so they can do more complicated things. The H7 has additional processing on board. The H7 can actually do video and audio processing as part of the chip. So, for example, on an H7, you don't need a separate OSD chip. The H7 itself can draw the OSD on an analog camera. An H7, Dominic Clifton, on his SP Racing flight controller, came up with a technology where the PID loop error is output as an analog audio signal to the video feed to your earpiece over the video transmitter. No shit. And so basically, as you're flying, you're hearing in your earpiece a sound that indicates the quality of the PID loop, and you can use it for PID tuning. That's made possible because the H7 can process analog signals natively. That's pretty cool. In general, though, F7 and H7 are faster and have more program memory. The other difference is that the F7 and the H7 have invertible UARTs. So there are some serial protocols like SBus that use an inverted serial signal, and an F4 cannot process those signals without a hardware inverter. It's just literally a little circuit, a little component that's on the board. And that means with an F4, if you're trying to use an inverted serial signal like SBus, you can only use it on one UART because that's the UART the manufacturer put the inverter on, and that UART's no good for anything else. So with an F7 and H7, you have more flexibility with where you solder your peripherals and use the UARTs. Generally, the F7 and the H7 will have more usable UARTs, although that's not always true. Some of the F4 have plenty of UARTs. Is 2.5 inches too big for a little inside flying? Man, that depends on how good of a pilot you are. Many people would say that it's a bad idea to fly an open prop 2.5 inch or even a 65 millimeter indoors because it's going to scuff up your walls and scuff up your furniture. It can be done, but if it's open prop especially, you're gonna leave some marks on the wall. So take that into consideration. Are the Goggles 3 a better value over the Goggles 2? Well, what are they selling for right now? Goggles 3. Get FPV has the G3 for $500. The G2, $450. What does the Goggles 3 get you? By the way, we also should have the frickin'... Really, the Integra is the one we should be looking at. Because the Integra is $349. That's the one we should be looking at. Because frankly, the Integra, you don't give up much compared to the G2. And you get a lot cheaper. So, no question the Integra is a better value. The big question, though, is that the G3 support all the new features of the 04 Air unit. Like the race mode, the 60 megabit per second bit rate. So like the G3 is the future, okay? But if you just want to fly 03 and 04, but not with the full performance, then I think the Integra is the smart way to go.
Chat wants to know.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Chat wants to know why the N3 isn't being pulled up.
Well, they're just baby goggles. They're just a baby. N3, they're just a baby. Yeah, okay. Hang on, I'll finish that thought. The G2 is $50 cheaper than the G3. I think I'd probably just spend $50 to get the G3 and be future-proofed at this point. I think the G2 needs to be marked down more. And I suspect that as soon as the 04 actually releases, bam, the G2 is going to get marked down significantly. At which point, maybe the G2 will be a better value. The DJI... Well, first of all, you can't buy the N2. What is it?
N3.
N3, sorry. I don't think you can buy the N3 by itself. You can only get it in a kit with the Neo.
No, I think it's shipping by itself already.
It is. Well, la-di-da. I didn't know that happened. So $229 for the DJI Goggles N3. The Goggles N3 are not a binocular style goggle. They're a large, more like a box goggle. They do have two eyepieces, and I think do they have two screens? Does it? I'm not sure about that.
It's a single screen.
Single screen. So it's like a box goggle, basically. It's a very good box goggle. Only does 60 FPS, so it's not going to have the lowest possible latency. And I believe it doesn't support the. Does it support the race mode? Well, we don't know for sure. Max video transmission of 60 megabits per second.
It will support the race mode in the future. for the 04. Yeah, it and the Goggles 3 will, because they have the new chip, I believe.
But only 60 FPS, so you're not going to get the minimum latency of 31 milliseconds. So you're not getting the lowest possible latency, which some people won't care about. Yeah, so that's pretty compelling. The DJI V2 goggles people liked a lot. Now, they had dual screens. They had giant screens, but they were dual screens. I think DJI is going to do a pretty good job with a single screen. It's going to be a pretty competent goggle, and at a price of $229, it's going to be pretty compelling. It's a lot bigger than the G3 or the G2 or the Integra, that's for sure. But it's way cheaper and does almost everything that those other goggles do. Is the race mode 15 milliseconds comparable to analog? No. And I haven't flown the race mode 15 milliseconds. DJI, no. I don't know if anybody has, because I don't know if it's even been released yet. But I have flown the walk snail race mode. And what they've done is they've gone to 540p at whatever, 120 frames per second. Walk snail's 100 frames per second. They've gone to 540p lower resolution, and as a result, they have much more consistent packet timing because the packets, they're fewer, they're smaller, and it's easier to retransmit them without messing up your timing. This is how I interpret it. So walk snail race mode starts at 19 milliseconds, and then as you fly away, it goes up to 21 milliseconds, and maybe it gets up to 23 or 25 milliseconds, worst case, at the expense of 540p absolute just trash-looking video. So it's not possible with the way that DJI and walk snail encode their video, it's not possible to have fixed latency. That's just not how iframe encoding works. You can try to minimize your latency, and you can try to reduce latency spikes, but you can't guarantee that they're not going to happen. So when DJI says 15 millisecond race mode, that's like going to be when you're right next to yourself, and then as you fly away, it's going to jump up a little bit, and it's still going to be lower, but it's not going to be consistent like analog, and it's not going to be as low as analog. Oh my God. Game scene. I answered this question like 45 minutes ago. You can stop asking it.
Well, he's been banned in chat twice because he keeps spamming it and then gets timed out for longer periods. So this is his last chance, but he probably missed it because he left while he was timed out.
Oh, okay. Can we just get rid of him? How long can we time? Let's time him out for 24 hours. There we go. He's timed out for 24 hours. I even answered the question. Game scene, I answered the question. You don't have to keep asking it. I'll answer it again right now. It'll probably be too heavy, and the wires won't be long enough, so you need to extend the wires. I don't recommend that you do it. Oh my goodness gracious. Goodness gracious. The guy just wants his question answered. All right. Oh. Is there a way to get video from any DJI goggles to a phone or external monitor? Yes. The DJI Fly app can do it. Now, that's not going to give you an external monitor, but it is going to give you a phone. The other thing is a thing called Cosmo Streamer. Cosmo, C-O-S-M-O, Streamer. Cosmo Streamer. And that, I have a video about Cosmo Streamer. If you just search Joshua Bardwell, Cosmo Streamer, then you will find it, and it can do what you're asking for. A little bit of work to get it running, but I did it. It's probably so can you. Barrick Berenson, how important is balancing props? 7-inch is the first prop size where I even think about beginning to balance them. Below 7-inch, I don't think it's necessary to balance them hardly ever. Even at 7-inch size, the quality of the manufacturing is usually good enough that you don't need to balance them. But especially if you're doing a kind of flight where you're very, very sensitive to vibration and jello, like some kind of cinematic flight, it might be worth balancing them. And then above 7-inch, it starts to be very worth it to balance them. Although, again, if you're just flying FPV, it doesn't matter as much. But again, if you're trying to do cinematic stuff, then it can start to matter. I'm fundamentally lazy. I always just put the props on the drone and fly it and see what kind of results I get. A lot of times the results are fine. Yeah, if you're just doing like beast class racing, you don't need to balance the props. Just send it because you don't care. The vibrations are the FPV camera is probably not going to pick up the vibrations, and you're not really running a GoPro probably. Is there a formula for how much power or torque it takes to spin a propeller? No. Not even a meaningful approximation. There are too many variables, and what you would need to do is get a test stand like Chris Rosser has built and test motors and props.
Yeah, I will say you sound like the kind of person that if you want to get into that world of things, you should go to eCalc and dig into eCalc for drones. Like if you really want to you don't need to, that's not required. Most people will never need to do that, but I know a few people who've gotten really excited, like to do builds, enter things into eCalc and use it. So like that's where you would do that sort of information at without having a test stand.
Yeah, it's ecalc.ch. I don't know what the CH ending, what country is that? Anyway, presumably that's where this is hosted. ecalc.ch and multi-rotor, and it can do all kinds of calculations and approximations. I don't think it is calculating exactly what you're asking for, but it does give you a lot of information.
It will essentially say when you're over-propped, which I think is a similar idea to what you're asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Fernando, that's a good question. If I upgrade my ESC to use AM32, will I still get RPM and temp data from it? It's a 55 amp Mamba. Fernando, you will get RPM via bidirectional D-Shot. You're asking about ESC telemetry, I believe. I'm pretty sure that AM32 supports ESC telemetry. I don't know that for a fact, but it's kind of inconceivable to me that it doesn't. However, keep in mind that the RPM data from ESC telemetry is not used by Betaflight. I believe it is used by iNav, if you're doing RPM filtering with iNav. And many ESCs today don't have temperature sensors in them at all. And so the temperature just shows 0 degrees Celsius. So I think it does support it, but even if it didn't support it, I wouldn't think you'd be missing very much.
Also, I think the temp now comes in over bidirectional D-Shot with the new D-Shot telemetry thing that happened in the new Betaflight. That's my memory of what happens now, is that now you get a temperature as well.
Is that, what Betaflight version is that?
I think it's like 4.5 or 4.5.1 that allows that. And I think I think that's why you get that new warning that's like D-Shot_telem or whatever sometimes when you're trying to arm. I think that's why.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter because so many ESCs just read 0 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Because they don't have a temperature sensor to begin with. Let's see here. Are there build quality differences between motors made in 2015 versus modern motors? Massive difference. What do you look for to tell if a motor is modern and still viable? I couldn't, like, they look different. There are cosmetic ways that motors have changed that would tell me that whether it's a modern motor. But no, the engineering of FPV motors since 2015, they're so much better refined, better built, more powerful. One of the biggest changes that was made was going to higher strength magnets. I remember the shift from like N45 to N48 to N52 to N52SH, and motors just got more and more powerful for the same weight. The way that the stator laminations have gotten thinner and more dense. The machining of the bells, the gluing of the magnets, the balancing of the motors, so many things have changed, and the engineering has just gotten so refined and so insane. Just huge differences. If I had to tell a motor was modern versus a motor that was old, I mean, the one of the things that's changed is cosmetic, but in addition, the size of motor that's used has changed. So today, for a 5-inch build, you're usually going to have a 2207 motor, usually. Back in the day, 2204 was standard for 5 inches. And then, we went to 2205. Oh, it's such a big motor. What are you going to do? So, like, the sizes. If you gave me a 2205 motor from 2016, I would say don't run it. It's too small. It's not powerful. It's not torquey enough. It's going to fly like shit. Well, why were we okay with it back in the day? Because everything flew like shit. The flight controller flew like shit. The motors flew like shit. The ESCs flew like shit. It all flew like shit. So now we have flight controllers that fly amazing, ESCs that fly amazing. If you take them and you put a motor that flies like shit, why would you do that? Don't do that. Right? Don't fly a motor from 2005 with a flight controller from 2024 or 2015 rather. Don't fly a motor from 2015 with a flight controller from 2024. In fact, in a lot of cases, old ESCs and old motors, if you pair them with a modern flight controller, it freaks out and it won't fly. Because the motor and the ESC are so unresponsive that the flight controller has not been tuned. Why did it fly okay 10 years ago? Because those flight controllers were tuned for slow, unresponsive ESCs and motors, and that's why the whole quad flew like shit. But now, our flight controllers are tuned for modern, responsive motors and ESCs. If you pair them with an old motor and ESC, a lot of times it won't even fly.
Has anyone done a video like that? I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, Rotor Riot did a video where they used old hardware. They built drones with old hardware and they flew it.
Right.
As far as specifically pairing old motors with modern flight controllers, I don't know about that. Seems like somebody has.
Yeah, somebody said multi-wheel on 8S.
Silliness.
So what batteries were you running back then? 3S, 4S?
3S. So my first quadcopter was 3S batteries with a Sunny Sky 2204 motors, I think, on 6-inch props. I remember, 4S. I don't know if I'm ready for 4S. You know, that was the big move. But yeah. So, and the props would shatter if you so much as breathed on them. I'd come back from flying and I'd have spent $25 in props, and I would feel really bad because that felt like a lot of money at the time. Well, first of all, it was, that was 10 years ago, and that's like $50 in props today because of inflation or whatever. And also, I wasn't a professional drone guy. I was just a dude with a day job. So now when I break props, I just go to my giant drawer of props that manufacturers have sent me, because they just hope that I'll fly them and use them in the video, and I just get more props, and I'm like, I'm good to go. But back in the day, I would go flying for the weekend and break 8 props and be really sad at how much money I had spent, but I had a good time, obviously. So a lot has changed. Do I dye my beard? Do I look like I dye my beard? What the fuck? Yeah, I dye my beard. I dye it gray and black and gray and black and gray. What the hell? Give me a break. Flying FPV says I have a range issue with my VTX. My video is super clean when I'm close, but 10 feet away it's choppy and black lines everywhere. My guess is that you're in pit mode. Even at 25 milliwatts, the minimum power for most VTXs, you should get more than 10 feet away. If your video drops out after 10 feet, your VTX is likely in pit mode. What you need to do is look up your VTX's manual at how to take it out of pit mode. And the exact way to do that is going to vary depending on your VTX. But it's probably in pit mode, and that's how you need to fix it.
Other possibilities are you're on the wrong channel, you used auto scan and you're close, but you're not on the actual right channel, right? It could be that you need to unlock the VTX, you've set the power, but it's not actually getting to that power because some VTX need to be unlocked. You can check the manual for that procedure. And it could be that you have a damaged antenna or something like that, of course.
And it could be, did you say the bad VTX table?
Nope. That's good. That's another one.
It could be that your VTX table has the wrong power levels, and that will cause the VTX to lock itself at 25 milliwatts. But that would be 25 milliwatts, not pit mode. Do any of them go to pit mode in that situation? I don't think so.
I think it goes to the lowest available power on the table, which I think in some cases can be pit, but normally it's 25 and then pit's 2, right? Like, 'cause sometimes you get to 0 on 2. Okay.
I don't know about that.
All right.
Yeah, but that could be it. It could be bad VTX table. I just had to get the last word in. We got a super chat here from Biochi, who says, I built a Recon 5. The flight controller is flipped around. The motors are reordered and are spinning reverse when tested in Betaflight and BLA 32. But when tested by arming, it spins the opposite direction. Any thoughts about this? My thought is that you have somehow literally the only thing that can cause motors to change directions when you arm excuse me, suspense building, is 3D mode. You've enabled 3D mode. That's it. Now, they should also change direction when you use the motor sliders, but maybe you didn't notice that? But also, it wouldn't arm. If you had 3D mode enabled, it wouldn't arm with the throttle all the way down. You'd have to center the throttle to make it arm. So there would be a whole lot of facts that you wouldn't be mentioning. But the motors should never change direction unless you've enabled 3D mode. In the ESC setting, it's called bidirectional mode. And what I find some people do is they go into BL Heli and they see the word bidirectional and they think, bidirectional, I want that, right? And they enable it. And what they don't realize is that bidirectional D-Shot in Betaflight and bidirectional in BL Heli are not the same thing. And you do not want to enable bidirectional in BL Heli unless you're flying 3D. Dave S. says board orientation is wrong. I don't see how board orientation could cause the motors to change direction. If the motors spin the right direction when you use the motor sliders, they should spin that exact same direction when you arm. Period. Blunty, thoughts? Got anything to add? I'm a little stumped on this one.
No.
Yeah. The other thing that we sometimes see is that the ESC will have a defect where every time you arm, sometimes it spins one way and sometimes it spins the other way. And that, of course, is a problem. But that's just a defective ESC. Have you enabled turtle mode? If you enabled turtle mode, then only 2 motors would spin, not all 4. That would be how you would know that. So if somehow you have arm and turtle mode on the same switch, but like I feel like he would have mentioned that only 2 motors were spinning. But that's a good point. Props on wrong wouldn't cause the motors to spin the wrong direction. So hopefully that's helpful, and it's one of those things. I think. Is there any way to get analog input to a DJI Goggles 2? No. Sorry. Thank you for a $10 super chat. The answer is no. It isn't. There isn't. The DJI Goggles 2 technically do support video streaming over Wi-Fi. You can cast to them, and theoretically, if they support that, there is some way to massage a signal to get it to stream into the G2, but the latency is going to be unacceptable. So, in reality, the answer to that is just no.
Can you answer a question we have in chat?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. If you have a drone that you slam the throttle up and the drone accelerates at whatever rate from 0 to 100, right? You're on the ground, you slam the throttle up to 100, it goes whatever rate, okay? If you put a throttle limit on that drone, so instead it's 50%, and you slam the throttle, is the acceleration from 0 to 50 any different?
I see what you're asking. Will it accelerate just as fast but cap out sooner?
Correct. Or is there some demand on the throttle from doing 100? No, because it's sending 100.
It will accelerate. Right? It'll accelerate faster, and here's why. I don't know the exact. I don't know the exact mechanic, but do you remember when they talked about dynamic idle on the throttle? That you get better. Let's say that the motor is at 15%. The ESC is at 15%. And you send a throttle signal of 10%. You will get braking performance. There will be braking. And that will slow the motor down. When the Betaflight devs released dynamic idle, one of the effects of dynamic idle was that you got faster braking, because you could drive the motor signal below the idle point, and the delta, the difference between the commanded speed and the actual speed, was proportional to the strength of the braking. So you have the motor at 15% and your idle is 5%, but you drive the motor signal to 0, the motor decelerates faster, and then as it approaches 5%, you bring the throttle signal back up and you let it slide into home. It stands to reason then that if my motor is at, let's say it's idling at 5%, if I then drive it to 100%, it will accelerate faster than if I drive it to 50%. Because the voltage, think about it, the voltage that is being applied is higher and more power is going through the motor, and it'll accelerate faster. So I would say that a motor output limit of 50% will make your motors accelerate slower.
But we were talking about a throttle limit.
Ah. Okay. So your motor output limit is 100%, but your throttle limit, still.
Is it the same?
Because
it's
it's right
50 on the output.
So
or it won't demand more until it
on the pitch, roll, and yaw axis, the PID controller could drive the motors to full. If I bang the stick all the way to the right, the PID controller will still drive the motor to 100% and accelerate as fast as it needs to. But on the throttle, going straight up in the air, that's simply a pass-through, basically, of the throttle position to the motor output.
So in real flight, just to think about it, instead of going straight up or with the variances, right? Then you will actually get a little bit different performance between motor output and throttle limit in the 50%. Like if we were doing that, because maybe the drone's rolling a little bit, and then you need extra motor to get moving, and the PID loop needs to be able to draw that extra. But in general, like you said, it's still limiting the same way.
Yeah, you always want to use throttle limit if you can, because you want the motors to have as much authority as they can so that the PID loop works better. The exception would be that if you had like a 6S 2700 kV build, where the RPM of the motors is just bananas crazy. At that point, you have too much RPM and too much power from the motors, and you can start to bring that down with a motor output limit. But in general, let's say I've got a 6S 1800 kV, perfectly reasonable build, right? I would not, but it's too powerful for me because I'm a beginner and I can't handle it. I would want to use a throttle limit because I want the PID controller to have all the authority it needs, all the motor power it needs to make the quad handle better. But the throttle limit makes it easier for me to manage the throttle. As far as the acceleration goes, I do think you will get slower acceleration from 0 to 50%. If you have a 50% throttle limit versus if you have 100% and you drive it to 100%, but then you pull it back at 50%. Yeah, that makes total sense, right, Blunty? Think about it. Which is going to accelerate faster? Just gut check this with me. If I go from 0 to 50% and stop, versus if I go from 0 to 100% and then back off at 50% at whatever the equivalent speed is, obviously the second one's going to be faster.
I think we're maybe Yeah, I think I'm communicating a different problem. Because if you think about it, like they're both going to accelerate to 50 at the same speed. The next one's just going to go to 100.
No, I don't agree. I don't agree.
Because the motor output will be what it is as soon as the motor output can be that, right?
No. What's going to happen is if I go from 0 to 100% throttle, the signal commanded to the ESC, obviously there's going to be a little bit of wobble as it stabilizes the drone, but the baseline signal is going to go to 100. It's not going to be 100 because there's saturation and stuff. And so the ESC will accelerate from 0 towards 100, and because the delta is bigger, it will accelerate faster. Because think about it. As soon as I go to 100% throttle, the voltage across the motor coil is VBAT, basically. And so the motor has more power and is spinning and is going to accelerate faster. I think that you will accelerate slower with a 50% throttle limit. You will reach that speed, that 50% speed, slower with a 50% throttle limit than if you just go to full throttle. Because you have half the voltage going through the motor, and so it's going to accelerate slower. I don't know. Interesting question. I hope that was yeah. And in fact, you know what, Blunty? You could hypothetically, this would be a terrible idea, but you could hypothetically imagine an inverse function of dynamic idle. What if you had essentially feed forward on the motor output? So if I go to 50% throttle, the flight controller goes 100% and 50% to try to get me to 50% faster. That would be a terrible idea because it would be really hard to tune and it would add complexity and it would make the ESC less predictable, and I don't think it would actually be a good idea. But
that's what I guess I'm confused about, because I guess the thing that I wasn't considering is that you're not driving a command in the ESC once you're past the command from Betaflight. You're driving a voltage, right?
Well, it's technically a PWM
like a
width,
PWM,
but it's a voltage, yeah.
Right. Because my thought is, like, if you're commanding the ESC to go to 100, you're still, and you're commanded to go to 50, it wants to get there as fast as possible regardless. But you're saying it doesn't matter because it's putting more energy in directly. It's not like,
right.
Like in Betaflight, you're commanding to a thing, right? And then you're driving something based on it. But the ESC doesn't have that part. It's just like, here's the amount of energy based on that percentage.
Yeah, it's literally a percentage, and it's a percentage of 0 volts to VBAT.
So it's just the physics of how fast the motor can spin up, and that's going to be more.
You got it.
Unless there's some limit based on weight or something, right? But you're driving more power into it, so the power has to go somewhere, which is the revolution of the motor.
Yeah. Now, there was a time, I don't know if this still exists, but there was a time when you could have a closed-loop ESC, where the throttle signal from the motor corresponded to an RPM value instead of a voltage across the motor. And so at that point, you would literally have a PID controller. It was, I don't think it had an I term. I think it was a PD controller. And it was running in the ESC. And so as you raise the throttle, then the PID controller would try to accelerate the motor and not overshoot and not oscillate. And that actually didn't, it's not really good to have one PID loop driving another PID loop. And like, obviously sometimes maybe that would make sense. But in this case, you have the flight controller PID loop driving the ESC PID loop. And it was too much, and it didn't work out that way. So it works the way we're talking about it now, where the throttle position essentially corresponds to a voltage applied across the motor from 0 to VBAT, and that's it. And obviously, the higher the voltage applied to the motor, the faster the motor will accelerate. Yeah. All right, well, hopefully that's a good answer. It's a very interesting question. I feel pretty confident about the answer, and I wouldn't be able to.
That makes sense.
I wouldn't be able to. Yeah.
My assumption was that there was more working in the ESC to drive to a certain number than there was.
Yeah. No.
And I guess there's not. It's just literally direct output.
It's literally just manipulating the PWM width.
Yeah.
That's it, the pulse width, and by proxy the voltage.
The only thing the software is doing is just translating digital into that PWM value directly, right?
Well, and it's doing all the commutation timing, right? So
Right.
it's commutating the motor and balance, but that's all. We'll hand wave that. You say it makes the motor spin. Yeah. Cool. What is balancing props? Literally, you take the prop and you put it on basically a spindle, and one of the prop blades falls down, and then you either, with some sandpaper, shave a little bit of weight off the prop, or some people will take a little tiny piece of tape and they'll tape it on the underside of the prop, and literally you are making the prop balance so that when it spins, it doesn't create vibration. Oh my God, Game Scene is back with a second account and is apologizing for spamming. All is forgiven. Don't now let it go. And don't spend the next 15 minutes spamming the chat with your apology. It's all good. 24 hours, your timeout will end, and then we'll all have forgotten this happened, unless you give us a reason to continue to focus on you. So don't do that. Okay. What would you recommend for someone who isn't the best at coding to figure out my PIDs? Don't touch your PIDs. Fly defaults. Get on with your life. The default PIDs fly very nicely. Could you make your quad fly better? Yes. If you want to get into PID tuning, I suggest either loading a preset from the Betaflight repo, the Betaflight presets tab. There are a couple of presets that might work for you. Don't just go crazy. Make sure it's like, if it's a 5-inch racing drone preset, don't put it on a 7-inch drone. You could damage it. But load a preset. Save a backup of your CLI dump before you load the preset. So if the preset, this is no good, my motors are hot, my quad is being weird, just reload your old CLI dump and everything goes back the way it was. And if you really want to get into PID tuning, look up Brian White on YouTube. Brian White is the maker of a tool called PID Toolbox. And PID Toolbox he's like the PID tuning guy these days. And it's a deep hole. It's a deep, dark hole that you can go down with PID tuning. And for most people, it's not the best way to spend your time. But maybe you're one of the ones who really wants to do that. We're getting close, Blunty. 9:52 p.m. 8 minutes. Aaron Ciotti has joined the stream. Aaron Ciotti, default PIDs for life. Damn right, Ciotti. You got to be a way better pilot than I am before PID tuning makes you give a shit. And many people are, but I'm not, by definition. Aaron Ciotti is going to be streaming at 10 o'clock. Where's that link? Where's that link, Ciotti? Airsoft Kid, the Rotor Riot Vision 40 kit came from Rotor Riot, ready to go. That's why you paid such a premium for it. You shouldn't need to do anything. Did you buy the whole kit from them? Goggles, controller, and all? You don't need to do a single damn thing. Just take it out, charge a battery, plug the battery in, turn the goggles on, go fly. If you bought the kit from them, and if you're confused, like, what do I need to do? Contact support. Again, the Rotor Riot gear costs a premium, and what do you get for that? Nothing. They're just ripping you off and stealing your money. No, that's just what people on the internet say. What you get for that is you get a kit that's 100% ready to go out of the box. No flashing, no configuring. Just turn it on and enjoy flying it, or crashing it, or losing it in a lake. Whatever you do is up to you. And if you're confused, reach out to Rotor Riot support, and they'll help you out. And they'll be like, because they'll handhold you a little bit. That's why they charge extra, because they offer that as a service. So, yeah. All right. I think I sounded a little annoyed there. I didn't mean to. I have a tone. If I'm annoyed, I'm annoyed at the people who complain about Rotor Riot products being overpriced, when what they really mean is that's not something I value and would want to pay for. But then they act like nobody would want to pay for it. That's like people who say, huh, I would never pay for an oil change. I'll change my own oil. Good for you. It doesn't mean the rest of us who pay for an oil change are like getting ripped off. We're just, I spend my time doing some things and not other things, and so do you. Right? Some people don't spend their time setting up their drone. They pay Rotor Riot to do it. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway. Does choosing the right video channel increase your range? Yes. 2 reasons why choosing the right video channel might increase your range. Number 1, the amplifier in a video transmitter is not completely like linear. And so there will always be channels of which there's higher output power and lower output power. Number 2, the antennas are not perfectly tuned. There will be channels that are more or less sensitive. And number 3, there will sometimes be interference on one channel. That means your video gets bad, but if you switch to another channel, there's no interference. So generally, lower channels get longer range, although without knowing how your antenna is tuned, you may not be able to generalize that. Oftentimes, the antenna will be most sensitive in the center of the band. The video transmitter will be most powerful on the lowest frequency. So for example, your video transmitter may be most powerful on race 1, but your antenna may be most sensitive on race 4. How do you figure those 2 things out? Well, it's tricky. So. And Wi-Fi doesn't exist on race 8. So if you're getting a ton of Wi-Fi interference, yeah. Ooh, Danny Courtier wants new goggles and digital with backwards compatibility to analog. If you want backwards compatibility to analog, HD0 goggles is the one to get, but you should carefully consider whether HD0 is the digital system that will make you the happiest. I think HD0, I think it's fair. I'm trying to be as fair as possible. I think HD0 has a little bit of a niche market, that there are certain types of people for whom HD0 is exactly what they want, but then that's a relative. I mean, we could just look at market share. 80% of racers at nationals used HD0, but HD0 is nowhere near 80% penetration in the FPV market as a whole. So if you buy the HD0 goggles, they're great. They're great analog goggles. Actually, some of the best analog goggles in some ways. But will HD0 be the digital system that you want the most? And maybe the answer to that is no. If you go with Walksnail, you could get the Goggles X, which also technically have analog support, although it's very bare bones, and I wouldn't be happy with the Goggles X as my primary analog goggle. But technically it does exist. And then there's DJI. Most people, I think, who fly digital and analog are going to be happiest if you can figure out a way to afford to have a dedicated set of analog goggles and a dedicated set of digital goggles. Unless HD0 is your preferred digital system, in which case, lucky you, you can fly. Technically, you can fly Walksnail with HD0 too, with a standalone receiver, but the goggles get really bulky. Then I'm not sure the money trade-off is worth it. Well, let's take this classic question. Would you recommend 2306 or 2207 motors for freestyle? Dude, the first thing I would say is I would bet almost any amount of money that in a blind test you couldn't tell the difference. If I give you 2 identical quads, one with 2306, one with 2207, and find a way for you to fly them so that you don't know which motor's which, and say, I'll give you $50 every time you correctly tell me which motor is which, and you give me $50 every time you incorrectly tell me which motor is which, I think I'd walk out of that with money. At the very least, we'd break even. Because it would literally just be a coin tossing contest, actually. Whoops. So I don't think you could tell the difference. And number 2, 2207 is better. The stator shape of 2207 is closer to the ideal proportions for heat dissipation versus responsiveness. So 2207 is better. If you needed a 2306 motor, the main advantage is that the wider motor gives a little better cooling. It does not give more torque, it does not give more power, and it does not give more responsiveness. In fact, a wider motor is less responsive because the mass is further from the axis of rotation. But theoretically, if you were overloading the drone with weight, 2306 would give a little better heat dissipation. So like a 4-inch prop on a Cinelifter, on a Cinewhoop with a heavy GoPro might benefit from a 2306 over a 2207. But for a 5-inch, 2207, period. Yeah, no, I realized halfway through my analogy that I wouldn't win any money because it would just be a coin toss. So I would have, the bet would have to be, if you can do better than chance, then you win the money. And then I guarantee I would win the money.
There's some kind of p-value or something in
yeah,
studies.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And has Ciati's setting up a stream, but I haven't seen a link to it. So Ciati, where are you? We're gonna wrap up, guys. It's 10 o'clock. It's been good hanging out with you. Oh, there he is. If you want to keep the love going, head on over to Ciati's stream. There's the link right there. And I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving for those who are celebrating Thanksgiving this week. And spend some time with your families. It's a crazy world. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. And in the face of all that, we can all, spend some time with our family, eat some good food, hopefully. And, take care of each other. Happy flying, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
It's not a pen. It's a camera joystick. Sorry. I've been clicking it all the stream.